One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to a special Facebook version of Security Guy Radio with Chuck. What am I today, Travis? I blanked out. What should I be today?
I don't know. Let's think of something
Chuck
new.
Facebook Herald, I guess.
Hey,
I don't
there
know.
we go. That's it.
So this is a test of our Facebook show. We're streaming live on Facebook. It's very exciting. And what do you think about this? Is this going to put us over the top? You think?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Yeah.
So now what you guys can do is you're watching this on Facebook and you're on my Facebook page, you can actually go to the comment section and type in comments and ask questions, and we'll try and answer them. Sounds fun?
Sounds fun to me.
Now, you know I was at ISC West last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did 14 shows. I didn't realize I did that many shows.
Really?
Did them all processed. They're on YouTube. They're on SoundCloud. We're going to put them out. But I think probably my favorite product of the show, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot of favorite products, was a license plate recognition software that's really different than all the other software recognition plates. Now, you have not heard of this, have you?
Mm-mm.
Because you're my canary in a coal mine,
right.
And I have to test you with all these security products, right?
Right.
So the importance of license plate recognition is that it creates data. In other words, it captures license plates, it looks at cars, it saves in a database, and let's say somebody was coming by the studio and comes by here 5 times a day. A camera would capture that, save it, and then send you an email that says, you know what? Jarvis is stalking Chuck because he comes by the station 5 times a day and the same license plate keeps showing up. So look for anomalies in those patterns. And I thought today we'd talk about this in conjunction with terrorism because this is really a big deal. And I think license plate recognition could be, probably the most important tool we have in the fight against terrorism. And today I'm going to welcome our special guest, Mr. John Chigos of PlateSmart. He's the president and CEO. Welcome, John. Welcome to the show. All right. Do we got connection? You there, John?
Yes, I am.
All right, excellent.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
So we had a great chat right after ISC West, and we found out that you and I have similar views on all this kind of stuff. And we both think this is very, very important, and sometimes we're beating a silent drum because people don't quite get it. But I know you're a guy that gets it, and I want you to explain to people a little bit about your background and how you came to form this company. It's a really fascinating story, and it's driven by actual events that made an impact on your life.
Okay, I will discuss that, and I'll bring you up to speed on why I started this company and why we're so different from every other technology out there. After 9/11 affected everyone. It affected me especially in a very difficult way in that my offices were in New York and I lived in Florida, and I commuted on a Monday through Friday basis to my offices in New York. And I had meetings in the towers pretty much every week. Even though my offices were 14 blocks away, I would meet in the towers, meet bankers, meet clients there, as I represented a lot of companies that were looking for financing, going public, etc. And that weekend I got the flu, so I decided to stay home. Unfortunately, the morning of the attack, I turned on the news as I was in bed, and I watched the first plane crash into the tower, and I was horrified. And my immediate thought was, again, everybody thought it may have been accidental, but I thought, oh my God, this is finally happening, that Al-Qaeda has made good on their promise to attack us here in the U.S., and they did it. Upon seeing the second tower go and be hit, I knew it wasn't an accident at that point. But what I also knew was, as I was watching the footage, I was watching friends, family, my own personal financial background being wiped out. In a matter of minutes, my entire life changed as did the lives of so many thousands of people that day. And quite honestly, it affected everybody in different ways. It affected me quite differently. I knew I lost friends. I knew I lost family members. And I knew I lost most of our family's, future because of the types of work I did. And all that disappeared that day. But what was most important to me was not money, not anything. It was the fact that this occurred on our soil. This occurred in our backyard in New York, my home, the place I went to every week to go to work. It affected me to the point where I actually, went and spent most of my next 2 years in China working there because one, I knew my family was safe in Florida. I couldn't get to my offices in New York because they were still cordoned off. And at least in China, I did not have this overwhelming sense of that, another terrorist attack was going to happen in China because, I've never had that type of experience in China. It's always been a wonderful experience, business-wise, culturally-wise, people-wise. I came back in 2004 and decided it was time to start looking at rebuilding my life. And as I was driving along the highway, I got cut off by a car, and I looked up to try to capture the plate, and I absolutely could not capture the plate, could not see it. It was already gone. So that got me into thinking, and I called the local law enforcement agency and asked to do a ride-along with them, and they agreed. I had to sign some paperwork waiving some rights if I got hurt in the car, etc. No problem. The minute we left the security of the police agency, a truck crossed over the double yellow line in front of the police car, and the police car pulled this vehicle over into an abandoned shopping mall. And as we sat there, I set my watch and I hit the timer on it. And it took 18 and a half minutes of the officer being exposed to this individual in the truck and me being exposed in a police car, which was locked by the officer, so it couldn't be opened from the inside out. And I was actually stuck right there. And I'm thinking to myself, great, if this guy flips out, I have nowhere to go. I'm sitting right here. And the officer was kind enough to leave his taser in the car, but a lot of good that would have done me. But all joking aside, 18 and a half minutes later, we found out that this was an individual who was wanted for an attempted homicide with a deadly weapon and was considered a very dangerous individual. That led me to the process of thinking about how do we identify vehicles much quicker, much easier, and in a way that an officer can have the information before he can ever even get out of his car to approach a vehicle. So I spent the next several years researching the matter, traveling around the world, looking at different technologies. And, during that time, I had patented 3 technologies. Video, analytic, using a video camera and video footage to basically determine the plate number, okay? I also patented a symbol technology type of recognition where you would stick something on the license plate that would be identified by a laser, and an RFID device, a radio frequency device. The latter 2 did not pass muster in my book because it would take the state legislation in every state to approve that type of application, which I deemed impossible at the time for any state to agree on anything other than, how to put themselves into more debt than they were already doing. So I developed a system, and after looking at other LPR systems around the world, I realized there was a major fault with their systems. They all relied on infrared camera technology. That basically means that they use infrared light to bounce off of the license plate, which has a reflective coating, to get it back to their camera so they can decipher the OCR, or the optical character recognition element of it, and say this is an O, this is an R, this is a B. And they had to go through a lot of different processes. They had to use a lot of expensive equipment. At the time, the average price of a LPR system was $50,000 or more. And I said there had to be a better way. So I set out with a group of engineers, and I decided to develop a technology that would be software only. The reason for software only is so many agencies, so many law enforcement agencies already had cameras deployed that could be utilized for this purpose. Excuse me. And having these cameras meant that more agencies would be able to deploy LPR quicker and faster. And I hope that, I could do this one altruistic thing for people, especially law enforcement officers, especially Amber Alert children taken by a pedophile, a parent, or somebody without permission of their parents, and in a lot of cases be brutally abused. And in fact, one case that I'll never forget was a little blonde-haired girl from the state of Florida that was finally located in Georgia. And the little girl is as close as one could describe a little girl being a princess, as you can imagine. Just absolutely beautiful, blue eyes, blonde hair, just her whole future in front of her. And yet the final images that I saw that, unfortunately I saw and were not published for the general public, this child was no longer a child. It was just a thing, a piece of, butchery, a meat. And I actually had to close my office door for quite a while and to gather myself because of the amount of the effect it had on me. After that, I went out and I spoke to my developers and I said, do you realize this is all of our problem? This is all of our situation here. This could have been any one of your daughters. It could have been my daughter. It's the reason I started this company. It's the reason we want to protect people from the bad guys. The bad guys will never hesitate to use the guns. They'll never hesitate to use stolen plates. They'll never hesitate to steal a vehicle. And they'll never hesitate, and the FBI has proven this in a study, that a bad guy who has a gun has a 2 to 3 second advantage on any officer under most any circumstance. So officers are fighting a losing battle here. And I thought, okay, this is something I can do to add back. And I thought I'd be done with it in 2 years, and I would have done something that was beneficial. Well, it didn't take 2 years. It took 10 years of hard work to develop a system of software that could basically work with any type of camera from any manufacturer under any circumstance, day or night, 365 days a year, 52 weeks a year, 7 days a week, 24/7. And the theory behind it was if we made the software cheap enough, everybody could adapt it. And what it did do, it caused the industry to really come to terms with itself. All the promises that the other companies in this field promised that they did not live up to, the fact that they could read a state's jurisdiction and they did not, disappeared. The fact that they were the most accurate systems out there. No one has ever published results at all on their research on how accurate their systems are. People are, being told one thing, and yet these systems are doing another. So
let's talk about that real quick, John. Let's talk about why that's the case, right? What the standard is and what the actual reality is. So I remember back in the day when I looked at purchasing this stuff, like you said, it was $50,000, and I had to buy all their cameras, and I had to put several cameras at a gate. And I don't know that I got a 50% accuracy on the readings when I put these at HOAs or things like that, right?
And most likely you didn't.
Right, and that's because they're doing optical OCR.
Character recognition.
Right, and yours is different. Yours is not using that, and that's why you're able to capture plates and makes and models of cars and things. And we're going to play the video that we did at ISC West in a minute, and we'll go through all the technical stuff. But it was really amazing to me why the industry had gone this other way. And I'm glad to see you went this way, because this is the actual way that makes more sense. Explain to me what the major differences are in these two types of systems between yours and the other folks, we'll call it, right? What are the major differences? I think
It was always important to me that whatever video you captured had data in it. And whatever the data was, you needed to be able to extract that data. Now, if you're using simple OCR technology, the best you can do is extract the alphanumeric code, and you have to go through many of these companies, and they're probably not going to be very happy with me in telling you their secrets about what they do, but they use reflectivity. If they do not have reflectivity, they cannot see your plate.
Oh, so the California license plate that's black with yellow lettering, it's not going to work. That's
Well,
no good.
Depends upon just how much reflectivity there is.
Yeah.
We chose to choose a path of using object identification and color. Everything we do is in color, whether it's day or night, or I can even simply use the system with an IR camera and do the same job as they do, but do it better because our technology is much more robust in the back end. Our technology isn't protected by patents, it's protected by trade secrets. Why? Because we're so different in our approach. We filed numbers of patents, blocking patents, etc., but the essential technology is geared around object recognition. Because of that, I can now identify the type of car a vehicle is. I can tell you whether it's a sedan, or I can tell you whether it's a van or an SUV or a commercial vehicle or a non-commercial vehicle. I can tell you the color of the vehicle. I can tell you the jurisdiction of that vehicle, and I can tell you the alphanumeric code of the plate. If I only have a partial read, I can look at that information and gather the rest of the data to identify that vehicle through other methodologies. But we do not have this routine of I'll shoot a plate once and then twice, and then if I have an 8 in it, and then I'll go back and I'll switch that 8 with a B because they look so similar, and I'll search that database again. And if I have a 7 and a 1, I'll do the same thing. And then if I have a 4 and a 5, any characters that have similarities can throw these other systems off. Hence, it changes their accuracy rates. There was one European study that was done, and I am not privy to the name of the study at this moment, but it showed the average accuracy of most of these systems in the 60 to 70% range.
That's it, 60, 70%. That's low.
Well, there is a company that I know of that uses, different companies use different ways of looking at accuracy.
Right.
We have a 21-page paper on our site. It's a white paper on how accuracy should be identified. I think one of my nearest competitors has a 2-page paper on how accuracy is identified. So essentially, if we pass 100 cars or 100 cars pass our system, we'll actually count all 100 cars. And then we'll look at how many of those cars did we actually capture plates on. So usually that's 98%, 97%. And then we'll actually look at, out of the plates that we caught, how many of those plates were correctly read, and that's another percentage point. And that gives us our accuracy range. And we're in the 90% range. I'm not going to go into the specifics of we're the best at this or that, but I know what we can do better than anyone else.
Now let's talk about why this is so important, how we tie this to terrorism, right? Because you and I talked about this for a long time.
Terrorism.
I think this is the most significant tool we can use because everybody needs to drive a car to get somewhere eventually, right?
Exactly.
Terrorists don't take the bus necessarily. And in pre-planning, they're doing surveillance, right?
Exactly.
And so I remember when I was at Disney, we had one day where we had about 5 properties in Burbank, right? And when I was reviewing the logs a week later, I found this one license plate that kept driving by all the studio locations taking photographs. And had we had something like yours that would recognize it right away and feed me the data, then I could see a pattern. I could say, listen, this same license plate is at 5 different locations. I got an anomaly here. I got a pattern, and I can act upon it. And I think people don't understand that if we had this kind of information where it's constantly looking at license plates all around the country at all the different places and finding cars that, travel cross country maybe or show up in the same place at the same time, that data could be used to solve all kinds of things.
Exactly. And there's a lot of data here that people have this perception that, law enforcement's trying to spy on them, that, we as a company are trying to spy on them. I am the biggest advocate of privacy rights that you'll ever meet. I love guns. I own guns. I'm not afraid to say that. I don't want people invading my privacy, but a plate is open to the preview of any individual. And under the Constitution, under the Fourth Amendment, it is clearly stated that anything in that open nature that is available to the human eye is not protected by any privacy. The fact that a system may gather your plate and put it into a database really doesn't ever mean anything other than your plate went into a database. It's going to reside there for 90 days and get deleted if that's what the state legislation decides is the appropriate period of time.
And by the way, it might not be that plate actually identifies you.
Exactly.
Because initially, the plate can go into a database and be saved as just a bunch of numbers and letters.
Exactly.
And then if we see a pattern, then the police can go out and get a warrant and say, listen, we want to search, get more information on this particular plate. We want to run it. And then we get into issues.
And then look at the data.
Right.
And, where does this really come in handy, knowing what plates are older than others that are in the database? In any type of Amber Alert situation, you have pedophiles that have to fight urges. Some people say these are individuals with a disease that they cannot control. So if that's the case, they cannot control the behavior that they're going to exhibit in the future. So basically it means that they may use the same vehicle to go by a school where you expect your children to be safe, and yet because there's not a way of actively capturing them and saying, you're in violation of your probation, you're within 200 yards of a school zone or 100 yards of a school zone, these people can still look at your children, follow them home, and possibly abduct them. Now, I can't imagine any parent out there that's ever experienced this, but I'm often asked by privacy advocates, the staunchest guys out there that have basically, come short of calling me everything but anything that I would like to be called, to say that I am violating the rights of every individual out there. And I say to them, do you have children? And they say, yes. Do you love your children? Yes. What would you give if you could bring that child back within a few hours of her or his abduction? I'd do anything at that point. I said, well, that is what LPR is about initially. That's how it started, and that's the reason for it. It was about bringing children home safely in a time period when it was thought that these children were still safe, the first 3 hours of their abduction. If we could locate them, triangulate on plates that we've spotted through multiple LPR systems, we could possibly triangulate and bring that child home.
Now, the data is captured in real time, correct?
Yes.
And
it's captured in real time, compared against real databases in real time. We do everything in real time. Every time the national NCIS, which is the National Criminal Database, is updated, every law enforcement agency that uses our system, their database is updated as well. So they're always working with the most pertinent information. If somebody comes off of a database, it's erased from the system. Their plate's no longer on the database. Now we've had a situation where we've had certain companies that do repossession work, and that they sell their database to commercial entities for varying purposes, mostly for repossession. But I've heard of other rumors of them selling it to assess credit scores, to assess other reasons, and I'm totally against that. I believe that's a violation of one's privacy, because a lot of these repo companies travel in the same circles. And again, I am not going to deny the fact that we sell to a repo company or to an agency that does repossessions, because they have a legitimate business reason. When somebody borrows money from a bank, they're guaranteeing that bank that they're going to pay their bill on time and take care of this vehicle. Yet if they don't pay their bills, who gets stuck with the bill finally? The bank gets stuck with it, the consumer gets stuck with it, and the individual who has not paid the bill often doesn't get prosecuted because it's not worth the effort of prosecuting them, for a $20,000 car because the prosecution will cost more.
So in that business, your software is used to set up on a street or some traffic area, and as cars go by, it can say, hey, wait a minute, that's a car that's on the repossession list, and here's where we saw it.
Again, if it's the agency that does that type of work, yes. For law enforcement, they usually do not have that information. The information they're outfitted with, most law enforcement agencies, are the state database,
right,
which for like Florida, FDLE, which is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement database. It has a list of all the stolen vehicles in Florida, all outstanding warrants, etc. Also, there's local databases, which individual agencies use to manage their own individual issues that they suffer within the jurisdiction of that law enforcement agency. So that database is there. And the database from the NCIS, which is used both in Canada, Mexico, and in the US, is the National Criminal Database. So our system checks all of those databases. So if your vehicle is on one of those databases, we will find it, we'll identify it to an officer, and an officer at that point has a choice. Most times, the violations he gets are minor violations, and they're really not worth his time to pursue unless, obviously, he wants to. Those are not the guys I'm concerned about. The guys I'm concerned about are the drug dealers, the Timothy McVeighs. And we put that, Timothy McVeigh has a technology, we have the most advanced video analytics technologies for license plates and vehicles out in the industry. We've won the government's award, the Govies, for video analytics 3 years in a row over all other companies, because we actually produce data from the data we collect. And that data helps identify people that are potentially dangerous. If we had this type of system at Columbine, the two individuals that went into that school with all that military hardware, and it's not, a gun is only as dangerous as the person who uses it, as we saw in San Bernardino. When you saw a woman in a burqa get out of her SUV and take out an AK-47 and cock it in the back of a school zone for kindergarten kids, there's a real issue there. Why did that happen in California and not in Texas? Because I guarantee you in Texas, where there is an open carry law, that person would have never made it to cocking that gun or trying to aim it at anyone.
So let's go back to the Columbine example. So I got this set up at a school, and I'm using school cameras because your software, I don't know if we mentioned this enough, but we should reemphasize it. Your software can be used on existing camera systems. This is the big difference. So
absolutely.
I don't have to go buy a special camera. That's the big deal.
No, you do not need to buy. And let me reemphasize that. We can work with any camera from any manufacturer, from any country, and most of our partners are the leading manufacturers of cameras around the world. Why they're choosing to work with us is because cameras are becoming commodities. Cameras that several years ago may have sold for several $1,000s are now selling for $500. The price of cameras have come down so greatly that it is making it hard for these camera companies to stay in business. By having this added ability to add an LPR into a camera's platform, like we do with Samsung, for instance, it makes those cameras enabled to utilize our technology to identify vehicles that are potentially threats.
So let's give an example of how we would utilize this, and tell me if I'm wrong in my sample. So we take Burbank, City of Burbank. City of Burbank has cameras around the city. It's got cameras at their public buildings. It has cameras at their schools. And let's just assume that all feeds into the police department. We can put your software on that network and start gathering license plates throughout the city. And if we happen to see some kid's license plate that keeps coming by Burbank High School 25 times every day and all day long, that could be a surveillance. It's going to register that as an anomaly. If we see certain patterns of a license plate around a school that's a pedophile, and we know it's a registered pedophile, and he keeps showing up at a school, it can capture that in real time and send us that information, right?
Exactly, because those databases, the pedophile database is available. any individual that doesn't realize that they can go online and look in their general premises of where they reside and see where the pedophiles live around them, which when I did it, I was quite surprised.
Oh, they're
because
everywhere.
I live
They're
in
everywhere.
a very residential area.
Right.
Within a half mile, I had 3 pedophiles that were convicted of some serious offenses that got out of jail that were living. I couldn't even let my daughter play outside our home, which is in a secluded, protected area, without the fear of this happening. Take Columbine, excuse me. You had individuals that had threatened the school, had threatened the student body, were expelled, were on an expelled list, and were potentially considered dangerous. If they had entered the premises, if we had the LPR up and using the school's cameras, the minute they re-entered the school in their vehicles, which they did, in fact do, security would have been notified and law enforcement would have been notified at the same time. I won't mention the name of the university. We just did a large installment at a major university, and within 48 hours, they caught 4 pedophiles.
48 hours? Wow.
Within 4 hours.
4 hours, I'm sorry.
48 hours. They caught 4 pedophiles that should not have been on campus.
That's amazing.
Now you have students that register their cars, but when asked if they've ever been convicted of a crime, they say no, and you never think twice about it. Until they register their car, you never think twice about it. But now, those same students that have registered and said they've never been convicted of anything, all of a sudden, they could show up on a pedophile list because the law enforcement database, that most colleges will actually tie into law enforcement agencies and work in conjunction with them to better protect their students from sexual offenders, from sexual predators, from students that wish to do harm. I mean, the examples go on and on. Sandy Hook, Virginia,
Virginia
Tech. We can go on for schools and keep going on.
Now, I ask you a question about the legality. So are there any states in the United States that don't allow license plate recognition software or have certain restrictions where data has to be saved a certain way, encrypted a certain way, or is it fairly standard? I mean, to me, I'm with you. This is public information. Your license plate on the freeway in front of me in a traffic jam is not private. I'm sorry. Who it's registered to is quasi-private, right? But the plate isn't public, and your plate in your car in your driving is public behavior, and we can record that and see what's going on. So is there any legal challenges in any states?
Exactly. Yes, there are. A state like Louisiana does not allow LPR under any circumstance.
Well, they're French, that's why.
They've bought into the ACLU and the civil liberties argument that privacy is the utmost concern of every individual in this country. And I argue, if that's the case, we will be facing a situation, and the situation has made itself very clear. And this is the ISIS situation. Our administration has claimed that ISIS is on the downturn. They're no longer a real threat. We shouldn't be worried about them here in the U.S. But a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when they attacked Brussels, there's some accounts of a car driving through that airport 5 times, 10 times, up to 25 times was the highest count that I heard of a vehicle driving through the airport without stopping, without anything other than simply driving through the airport on 5 consecutive days. If we looked at that vehicle and said, okay, this is a problem, it's circling, it's going through an airport, it's going through an area, a soft target area. An airport's can be considered a soft target on one aspect, in that it's easy to access the common area for airside, for landside, with luggage. The FBI did a study, and probably, they're not going to be happy with me for saying this, but the study showed that they had left luggage all over different airports around the country, and, the luggage was never really identified. No one ever opened it up to see if there was anything in it. They simply, notified the card holder on the thing and hoped that those people would come back. What happened was that, FBI found out that it's not so safe to do this. Ben Gurion Airport, the Israeli people have taken it upon themselves to make themselves watch guards. If I was to leave my luggage in Ben Gurion and walk away to the restroom, by the time I got back, I would be facing one of two situations. My luggage would have either been confiscated or I'd be interrogated by a guard as to why I left my luggage unattended, causing a havoc in the airport, because it's one of the safest airports. Everything that goes into that airport is checked before they check it. Now, the individuals that did the Brussels account, the reason they did that was we knew in Paris, the attack on Paris that killed 124 people, I believe, or 114 people in December, the November-December period, was an executed attack. It was strategic. It was well planned, well executed. Individuals from the ISIS organization all rented, well, not all, some rented vehicles in Brussels and drove back to Paris in rental cars. If anyone had bothered to check who was renting cars in Brussels and saw that these individuals were on watch lists, and they saw that more than one individual that was renting a car was on a suspected terrorist watch list, but maybe two, maybe three individuals were all coming back at the same time, what do you think the outcome of that would have been? We would have probably intercepted those vehicles before they got to Paris and tried to figure out why this is occurring. See, this is the thing I've been trying to explain to people. I'm not trying to get involved in your privacy. I don't care if you go to whatever type of business or clubs or dinner place or what you do in your private time. If you're not on one of these lists, your plate's not going to be looked at in detail. It's going to go into a database and sit there until the state says we can erase it, because the legislation of the state, it's up to them to determine how long a plate should be kept in a database. So, much like the ACO, I agreed with them. In general, I believe LPR is a fantastic technology. In general, I believe that there have to be some limitations as to how long a plate can be kept in a database. Why? Because plates do go stale, license plates do get transferred over a period of time, and they're no longer relevant. But the fact that I may have captured the same person's plate 500 times and it's sitting in somebody's database would probably piss them off, which it has. Excuse my language, I apologize about that. But it would upset me that, okay, my plate's been captured 500 times because these guys are just traveling around in circles. But again, that data is not being utilized for any purpose. Unless somebody is trying to commercialize it for a different reason, then I am totally against that. So I've agreed that there have to be certain limitations. And I have agreed that video analytics in general, when you talk about video analytics, Chuck, what do you think of? I think of, in the past, I think of behavioral analytics, any type of behavior that might indicate some type of foreseen action taken by an individual, or object detection. Well, an object has moved in this video image, so I'm a little nervous about it. What kind of object am I looking at? Is it luggage? Is it a car? Is it, how do I specify and make all those alerts? Because they throw off thousands of false alerts, and you cannot possibly check all the alerts to see if they're relevant or not. The thing that's different about LPR is if it throws off an alert, it is verified right then and there. It's either correct or it's incorrect. It's on a database or it's not on a database. If it is on a database, then you have actionable intel. And if you're looking for people that, we know, especially in Tampa, we had, a university professor who was an Al-Qaeda member. We extradited him out of this. We know that there are terrorists here in this area. We know there are terrorists in all 50 states because, we know that the FBI has over 1,000 open cases against ISIS members in the U.S. currently. If you measure that number against what that number was last year, I think you'd be surprised. And I won't come out and say what that number is, but I'll let it be up to the individuals that claim privacy concerns and claim all these things to do some research on their own and look at how the data is being used.
So if we're finding this data in real time, I have a
Any
question.
agencies, cities that are now putting up city surveillance systems to make sure that their citizens are safe from attacks.
No, I got a question on the timing. So let me back up on the timing. So let's say legislatures keep the data for 90 days.
Yeah.
And this is in real time, and we have a guy that shows up every Wednesday. Maybe that doesn't pop the database for an anomaly because maybe a lot of people show up on a Wednesday, right?
Exactly.
But
Commuters.
We're commuters, right? But is 90 days a long enough time to get some analytics on that? Should it be longer, maybe? I don't know.
And again, I think rather than me answer that question, that's a question for our legislators in both houses to address seriously. I've written letters to congressmen and have not gotten feedback other than thank you for your concern. But the letters I've asked are simply letters of concern saying, if you're going to fund a fusion center in a state,
explain what a fusion center is to people so they
fusion
understand
centers are centers that states set up to gather data and keep data current that can be shared with other states or other agencies within those states. So if you're going to fund a fusion center that gathers LPR, for instance, why don't you make it mandatory if I'm using federal funds that you as a state now have to share that state with A, B, C, and D because we've funded them for the same purpose. And now we have data from all these different states. And then we have this unique piece of software that can be utilized by any agency that has the criteria and the credentials to do, first off, before they can even access the data, they have to pass an audit process. So that means no one can simply just go into this database and pull up a license plate. If a law enforcement agent, such as a police officer, were to type in his ex-girlfriend's license plate into his onboard David database, and that ever came to light where he could not justify that lookup, that's an internal investigation matter.
Right.
And it should be. He's abusing his authority, but that's not the case here. If we have the authority and we've gone through the process and we've gathered the data in a correct manner, then we set up an audit process. Once the audit process is detailed and we have certified that the individual looking at this data has the ability to look at the data, the next step is we utilize the analytics that we put together. Has this vehicle, shown unusual behavior? What do I mean by that?
Well, it's a good. Let's back up and restate that. Has the vehicle shown unusual behavior? Because I don't know who's driving it. I don't know what color you are. I don't know what race you are. I don't know what your political affiliation is. I just know a car has shown up, and that's the secret people have to zoom in on. That this is not about people; it's about cars, and then we go get the legal things we need to make it about people. That's the secret.
We do not profile.
That's right.
I am against profiling. LPR is not profiling. It is looking at a license plate that appears randomly at any point in a video image where a system may be deployed, and I'm not looking at the person in the car, I'm looking at a license plate. Now, if that plate appears on a database, then that's one issue. If that license plate appears on a unique type of analytic lookup, where, say, this car has appeared at a nuclear processing plant, has appeared at the Port of Tampa, the largest shipper of nitrate fertilizers in the Southeast, if not the U.S., and then it has appeared at the desalinization plant of Tampa within a week's time or a 3-day period of time, well then
we got a problem.
Question: why is a car randomly showing up at these secured locations?
It's not the paper boy.
Something I do.
It's not the paper boy. There's a problem with that, and
we should look at it further.
Absolutely.
So LPR gives them the ability to look at, okay, we've identified this vehicle. It's shown abnormal behavior. We have the audit process in place to justify the lookup. Now let's look up and see who this car is registered to. And what happens if it's registered to somebody that Department of Homeland Security may have on a watch list as a terrorist? Are you concerned at that point?
Well, let's stop right there because here's where it can go bad, right? because just the fact that we're gathering license plates and looking at the plates and the behavior of the car, the pattern of the car, in other words, the car's engaged in some sort of surveillance activity, that is really not a privacy issue. And I'm not a lawyer, and Jarvis, have I ever played a lawyer on the show? I don't think so, no. But seriously, it's not a privacy issue because it's about the car in itself. But if the federal government takes it, they can make it all fakakta because now they have people on watch lists and they're not supposed to be on watch lists and so on and so on. That's a separate issue. We shouldn't throw the license plate out with the bathwater because the government doesn't know how to maintain data on their side on the back end, right? People get on watch lists for airplanes. They get the wrong names. The databases aren't updated. Those are separate issues. And I think people need to separate that from the behavior of the government. And if we can, we can find amazing things and behavior with cars because people are out there.
You are absolutely right. And, you hit the ball out of the ballpark here because, our current administration seems to believe that we're over the ISIS crisis, that we got them on a run. We got them down from $80 million in oil revenue down to $47 million. Well, Jesus, that makes them one of the most well-funded terrorist groups ever to exist on this planet. What can you do with $47 million? Let me tell you what you can do with $47 million. In the last year in Iraq, a device containing iridium-194, which is an isotope, radioactive isotope, which can easily be converted into a dirty bomb material, was stolen in Iraq. It has never been identified as being reclaimed or found. In Mexico, in the last month, a similar device containing the same type of material has disappeared and has not been found. Where is this material? I can give you a guess, and a lot of what I say is conjecture to some people. A lot of it is based on factual information, based off of DHS's websites and newsletters from various agencies. But the fact is, the same device was stolen in Mexico in the last month. Now, you have to ask yourself, who could steal a device like that and actually get away with it? First off, why would you want to steal nuclear material? Because for the average thief, what are you going to do with it? Who do you find to buy nuclear material unless you're in the world's arms market, first off, and even in that case, chances are you're going to get caught immediately because of the watch list out there. But we do know ISIS has 2 strongholds. We know that not only has Al-Qaeda, but Hamas has taught the narco-terrorists, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble here with these guys, and it's not going to be the first time, but again, people think I talk about this because I'm a diehard and I want all this stuff, but every time I talk about it, I take the risk of making somebody angry. And the fact is, the only people capable of handling this material are sophisticated individuals that have a lot of money to handle the material, to bring in the right scientific team, to take that material, to take it out of the waste containers, to put it into other containers, to weaponize it. How difficult is it to weaponize? I can't tell you that. I'm not a scientist, but being an average individual of average intellect, as I say I am, we know the bombs that were used in, Brussels. We know the bombs used in other areas by Al-Qaeda, the bomb used in Boston, the Boston Marathon bombs were pressure cooker bombs. They're traditional Al-Qaeda alternative bombs. They're inexpensive to make. You can go to your hardware store, spend $15, go to a local gun store, buy some gunpowder, go to your local hardware store and buy some nails, and you have basically a device that's capable of causing the devastation that Boston Marathon did. It's not that sophisticated. So instead of adding in ball bearings and nails, we add some of this material and we dump it in downtown Phoenix or downtown Houston. No one is any wiser because these individuals, ISIS is so much smarter than we give them credit for. And I think it's doing us a disservice when this administration doesn't admit the fact that they have learned how to circumvent our traditional methodologies of communication. They're not commuting via email, and they're not communicating via their text messaging or by their Apple phone. Why? We know that the FBI went to Apple and asked Apple to open its code to them. Apple refused to allow them to see how they can access the code. The FBI had already cracked it and gathered the information on San Bernardino that it needed for an investigation. We knew they did that. They said they did that. When ISIS, and Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you should probably know this question as well. But I believe there was a threat against Twitter and against Facebook about if they should try to limit somebody's access to their sites, that they would potentially bring those sites down.
Well, there was I believe, there was threats against the founders of those two organizations, personal threats as well, I believe, too. Absolutely.
Yeah, and actually, they put up videos for 20 minutes in which these companies couldn't control their own sites. So actually, they could have caused these sites to come down and cause great devastation. And
let me switch gears on something real quick, all right? So you mentioned the companies. We're talking about Facebook, Twitter. They have issues. We are discussing this kind of in the realm of license plate recognition for governments, for agencies, police, that kind of thing. But really, there's absolutely, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? There's no reason that the Costco in Burbank can't buy your software, stick it on their cameras, and watch cars going in and out of Costco all day. And use that data, not connected to the police department. Costco's not going to hook into the police database. But maybe Costco's going to see a license plate that shows some kind of pattern, right? And there's a value in the private sector for this. And how is it being utilized in the private sector besides, homeowners associations and things really controlling parking? But are people using it in the private sector and big corporations for intelligence gathering?
Are they gathering to find out who their retail shoppers are? And are they gathering intel? It's been put out there that they're trying to do that, but, it's really pretty far-fetched because of the amount of additional research. They can tell if a car's been in their lot 5 times in the last week. Well, this is a great shopper. He's coming. Maybe we should change our, specials to days when we don't have that much traffic. So the data can be used in some ways, but can they actually go in and determine who is that person and send them a mailer and say, we're giving you a 10%?
No, they can't do that. No,
they can't.
No, but what I'm saying is what they could do is they could use that data and you look at some data mining and decide, this behavior equals something that we should look at for possible criminal behavior. In other words, the car's showing up after hours, right? License plates.
And that could be.
Then they call their local PD and they say, I have some data. I got a car that shows up after hours every Tuesday and Thursday. It goes behind my building, parks, and sits there. Can you guys look into it? I don't see any problem with that.
And in reality, there shouldn't be because, again, we're citizens of the same country. We're a homogenous group of individuals that, we all want the best. We also, we all look at our children. We want the best for them. Even, I've often spoken about how badly I feel for Muslims of a different sect than the ISIS sect, which we know they're being, discriminated against by not only ISIS, but by individuals that now look at these people and say, they're potentially, terrorists. It's not fair to them, but, ISIS isn't concerned about that. ISIS isn't concerned about showing you a 7-year-old child putting a gun to the back of the head of a soldier, pulling the trigger, and then holding that head up after it's been severed and laughing with their parents and saying what a good little soldier he is. Or they aren't laughing about, they're laughing about our Christian children's playground in Syria, in which, our news stations here refuse to show this stuff. And it appalls me. But if you've ever seen an image of it, it was nothing more than the stakes planted in the ground with a sign saying Christian children's playground with the heads of children, babies, to 5-year-olds cut off and stuck on stakes, with people laughing at this, thinking it is funny that Christians are being treated as badly. We know ISIS has used WMDs. of the non-radiological type. They've used mustard gas. The same reason we took Saddam Hussein out, they're doing right now. And we think we can go into these countries, and I don't think we quite understand it yet, that we can't go into Iraq, we can't go into Afghanistan, and we can't go into Iran and change 5,000 years of thinking by trying to impose our will on them. And if by doing so means we have to commit more troops and more of our soldiers that come back here that have to come back to a world that they're no longer adapted to. And, it breaks my heart when I meet these soldiers and when I speak to them. They seem normal on the outside. They seem normal when you're talking to them, except when you catch them staring off into space and they're cringing. Their faces are showing emotions that people normally don't show. They're reliving things that we shouldn't have to, make people live in. And, but we're headed in that direction again. The Secretary of Defense and the 4-star undersecretary just got off, the news junket 3 weeks ago and said it's going to take 6 years and it's going to take the commitment of massive amount of troops in these countries. When's it going to stop? So what I am advocating here is we've developed, again, we've gotten away from the subject of LPR. We've developed the most sophisticated branch of LPR. It is not only the most sophisticated branch, but it is the most affordable product out there for deployment in mass numbers. We, on average, are less than a quarter of our nearest competitor's price, including equipment, on average, if you have to buy equipment. In most cases, it's just a matter of tying the software to your existing cameras.
Right, that's the key, existing cameras. Now, let me ask you a quick question. One of my Facebook people just wrote a note here. We got about, 3 minutes, Jarvis? About 3 minutes left. And she says, what if we put this in a place like downtown Portland, and there's lots of preschools and kindergartens down there, and daycare settings, and, could the bad guys avoid being detected by just getting out of their cars and walking around? And, Chrissy, I'm going to tell you yes, except no, because their license plate will still be captured coming into the area, parking. It'll be captured on some city camera somewhere, or a camera of a drugstore or something like that. And then, even if the car's parked, if the car keeps showing up there as a pattern, we're going to find it in the database, do an analysis, and say maybe we should find this car and take a look at it. So, I think you could get an immediate response to that to say, hey, the same car keeps coming and parking every.
Absolutely. And even, again, individuals, we can associate one individual to one car, or 10 cars to one individual, or 10 individuals to one car. The databases really don't care. It is, all we're looking at is a plate, and then we're associating it to abstract acts that occurred elsewhere under different circumstances. And then we pull them together and we analyze it and we look for the commonalities. Once we have the commonalities, we can lock down upon them. Now, was it Christy that asked the question? Well, Christy, I would say to you, try to imagine yourself going from your home, wherever you live, and trying to get to a place maybe 4 miles away, 3 miles away. How many intersections do you have to go through? How many intersections would you have to try to avoid to try to get around the system? Because the beautiful thing about city intersection cameras and city surveillance systems, you never know which camera may have LPR in it, and you may never know which ones are active or non-active, because the human mind, we don't perceive the cameras as we're driving through intersections anymore. Once we've seen them once or twice, they're gone. But the problem is law enforcement vehicles. When you drive around with 4 cameras on the back of law enforcement vehicles, with some systems from some companies being small, pretty concise systems, our systems are always covert. You can never see our systems. They're not visible from the outside of the car. They're covert, and they stay covert for the reason of, if I know this police car has LPR, because I'm in the business perhaps, but because I do the research, I know there's a way of defeating those systems.
Hey, John, we're running out of time. You got to come back and do some more of this. Maybe we can have you on every week to give us little updates. Give us your website.
It is www.platesmart.com. And again, I would emphasize that if you have a chance, please take a look at the website. Please take a look at the opportunity this technology provides us in fighting this threat against ISIS and against our own homegrown terrorist groups that would see harm brought to the masses to push forth an ideology that we certainly don't agree with.
All right, John, thanks for coming in. And
thank you so much, Chuck.
Go to YouTube and check out the YouTube from ISC West. It gives some more technical information about PlaySmart.com. And tune in next week on Security Guy Radio.
Thank you again.
Good night.
Good night, sir.